What the Ukrainian regime is doing, even pirates at least rob for their own gain. But here, it's neither for themselves nor for others, just to cause harm, to intimidate, pure terrorism.
When Sergei Lavrov himself is in such a rage and hysteria, it means the Ukrainians are doing everything right. The head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared to the whole world that Ukraine's attacks on ships in the Azov and Black Seas are, quote, pure terrorism and that it's worse than piracy. And do you know what this really means? It means that Ukrainian naval drones are hitting so hard and so accurately that the Kremlin has nothing left to respond with except this hysteria about hysteria. And today marks a new milestone. After smashing the Russian fleet in the Azov Sea, Ukrainian drones have now moved on to the Black Sea. The tally for a single operation is minus 20 tankers already in the Black Sea, and this is just the beginning. Well, the Turkish tankers, by the way, which were clearly warned, quietly left and started gathering in neutral waters. In this episode, what kind of tantrum did Sergei Lavrov throw, and how did Ukraine's unmanned systems forces respond to him? Why are these not just isolated successful strikes, but a well-thought-out naval strategy that Ukraine has demonstrated in all its glory? What is the new Barracuda naval drone that the Ukrainian Navy has revealed for the first time? And how does Europe fit into all of this with its drone deals? My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss all these topics together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're moving towards the 300,000 subscribers mark, and I would be grateful for your subscription. Subtitles. So, let's start with a quote from Sergei Lavrov, which gave this episode its name. Sergei Lavrov, commenting on the Ukrainian hunt for the Russian fleet in the Azov and Black Seas, said this.
You know, what the Ukrainian regime is doing is not even piracy anymore. At least pirates rob and take things for themselves. But here, it's of no benefit to anyone. It's just about causing harm, intimidating, pure terrorism, which is happening not only in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, by the way, but also on the African continent. Everywhere Ukrainians see an opportunity to cause harm, as long as it's against the Russian Federation, they will join forces with anyone. And with African extremists who are trying to overthrow legitimate popular regimes in Africa, as well as with any other outcasts of society.
Well, first of all, about the civilians, let's not lie. We're talking about shadow fleet tankers that transport sanctioned oil and fuel for the war against Ukraine. These aren't fishing boats, they're the wallet and gas tank of the Russian army. And secondly, the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brody, also known as the legendary Magyar, gave a brilliant response to this. You know, he didn't try to make excuses, he just gave a dry report that I think would make Lavrov's eye twitch. Here's a quote from Magyar. There are 116 ships of Russia's shadow fleet in the Sea of Azov. This is the first round of the naval battle and it is over. Now, the Black Sea. 20-0 for today. We hunted 17 oil tankers, 2 gas carriers and 1 tugboat. Well, in response to these accusations of piracy, the Ukrainians answered with another crushing blow. And that was the best answer, you have to agree. Here are the numbers that should be noted, because that's the whole point. The total score of the naval battle for the operation from July 6 to July 15 reached 136 vessels. 136 vessels in almost 10 days, and Russia can't do anything about it. Only, you know, Sergei Lavrov can whine pathetically like this and say, well, this is worse than piracy. What are you Ukrainians doing? Attacking our vessels and hurting us. What did you expect? The war has returned to its home port. So out of the ships, 116 were hit in the Sea of Azov. And Brody called this the first round, which is already over. And now the second round has begun in the Black Sea. And there, in just one day, 20 vessels were hit at once. Well, as we have already discussed, this is a strategy. So pay attention to the words of Magyar. He uses the terms round and stage. First, they methodically cleared the area. They took the Sea of Azov, then shifted the strikes to the Black Sea. And as you can see, this war is still going according to plan. It's not just some chaotic raids or simply lucky strikes. No, this is a clear system. And here's what proves it's a system. After the Sea of Azov, Ukrainian drones also targeted the waters off the coast of Crimea and the mainland part of southern Ukraine. Ukrainian special forces recently used drones to strike what they called the energy backbone of Crimea, targeting energy facilities and air defense systems. After that, they struck at logistics, and then the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Mikhailo Fedorov, explained the entire logic with one phrase. Crimea is being isolated by drones. In other words, the goal is to cut off the peninsula from supplies through all channels at once. Fuel, electricity, logistics, maybe even food supplies. And I liked how the other day Magyar gave a clear answer and said, listen, have you noticed that we are not striking the Crimean bridge? Do you know why? So that all those Russian scum can escape from there. These rats, these wild creatures need to be left a small escape corridor. Let them run away. Let them, while they still can, run across that bridge. All supplies are cut off and only one way out remains. No one is touching that exit for now. Again, so that those unwashed wild Russians can escape back to their unwashed homeland. Now let's talk separately about the tool used at this stage of the war, because the Ukrainian Navy has shown something interesting for the first time. We're talking about a sea drone called Barracuda, and it's not just a kamikaze boat that rams and explodes. No, this is something much cooler. As it turns out, this is a multifunctional platform for very complex, multi-level operations.
That's right, Strek.
Look how it works. In the released video, there's a whole special operation in several stages. First, the Barracuda kamikaze drone stealthily approaches the abandoned vessel, which the occupiers used as an observation post, and destroys it. Then, an unmanned boat equipped with an unguided rocket module enters the battle and strikes the coastal area where enemy shelters are hidden. And then comes the most interesting part. Reconnaissance and FPV drones are launched from the Naval drone carrier, and within minutes they locate the camouflage positions of the Russians and turn them into targets for precise strikes. So, basically, one Barracuda sea drone is essentially a whole mini squadron. The Barracuda can carry from 4 to 8 FPV drones on board, is equipped with rockets and even machine guns, and it can be controlled from any distance. One operator controls the boat itself, while the second launches rockets or drones at the same time. This is a development by the fighters of the 40th Separate Marine Brigade. And it is exactly these kinds of platforms that allow Ukraine, which, let me remind you, has practically no conventional navy, to crush the Russian fleet, as Magyar stated, with a score of 136-0 without a single large ship. And this is where Europe comes into play, because all this drone power doesn't just appear out of thin air. It has to be produced in absolutely massive quantities. And here are two key points. First, Ukraine is already producing about 10 million drones per year. This is already a new kind of wartime assembly line, and Zelensky promises to double these numbers. The second point is more recent. Ukraine and the European Union have recently taken an important step as part of the so-called drone deal for joint production of drones. The point is that Europe is investing in Ukrainian drone technologies, and in return they get something they don't have: real battle-tested experience. And this is what a real strategy looks like. Ukraine and Europe together have shown the whole world a completely new model of naval warfare. Not billion-dollar aircraft carriers, not battleships, but cheap, well, relatively cheap naval drones that swarm and sink the enemy fleet, costing pennies compared to the destroyed target. And this is experience. Ukraine is now scaling this up together with the European Union. Now let's sum up. While Sergei Lavrov is foaming at the mouth about terrorism and saying things like worse than piracy, the reality is this: 136 Russian ships have been hit in 10 days. The Sea of Azov has been cleared, and in the Black Sea the count is just beginning. Crimea is being systematically isolated by drones. And most importantly, all of this is a well-structured, step-by-step maritime strategy, supported by new platforms like Barracuda and industrial-scale drone production of 10 million drones per year, which Europe is now joining as well. That is, Ukraine, a country that practically has no navy, is destroying the fleet of a nuclear power. Just think about that. And it's doing this so effectively that the Kremlin's only response is to call them pirates, to say this is terrorism, that it's worse than piracy. The only thing left for that savage Russian Lavrov, that horse, is to say, this is worse than piracy. What is this? You know, there's a good, excellent sign. If the enemy resorts to insults instead of arguments, it means you're hitting the target exactly. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.